Hello, welcome to our in-person and virtual audience. My name is Amy McDonald, and I'm the director of this joint. I am so excited for this evening. I first saw Ayodele Casel perform on February 11th, 2019, when she was a Radcliffe Fellow, and she was performing her one-woman show called Diary of a Tap Dancer. And the reason I remember that date so well is I was blown away by this woman's talent and energy. And I immediately said, I've got to get her to CitySpace. And then COVID hit. So here we are, a couple of years later, and I kept pursuing her, and here she is tonight. We have, you're going to hear our interlocutor, Tiziana Dearing, who is our own phenomenal moderator. We'll be bringing out Tiziana's story. Tiziana will also, Ayodele will also be performing a few dance steps. I'd like to introduce first to the stage Tiziana Dearing, host of Radio Boston. And next, here is Ayodele Casel.
Feels nice to
awesome was that?
That was good.
What you do is so cool.
Oh, thank you. I kind of feel a little bit like a superhero that I get to just sort of like walk in these shoes. Nobody would know, like, right, going down the street.
That's right.
That's what you can do.
And then all of a sudden. So do I need to give you a second to catch your breath? Grab a drink of water.
It gets harder and harder as the years go on.
So I'm excited to have you. Take a second to swallow, and I'm going to set this up a little bit. I'm excited to have you. We have been having this amazing series of conversations called Phenomenal Women, although last night we had two groundbreaking journalists, and we made a friendly amendment during the show last night that this could also say, quote unquote, difficult women, which I think is quite fun too. So you are in the art space. I want to talk about that. But I want to kind of start in the same place with you that we've started with all the phenomenal women, whether they've been in business or they've been in food or in journalism, all the different things. But it's a little different with you, and I'll tell you why. Because usually my first question is, when is the first time in your life that you can remember defying expectations for a female? But when I read the Harvard Gazette story about you when you were a Radcliffe Fellow, they said that when you were a kid, you were a fighter.
Oh my God, I was thinking that same thing. That's so crazy. Yes, okay, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I'm like, what do you remember from this? Okay, the first thing that came into my mind was, oh gosh. Okay, when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, I used to fight in school. It's not good. My teachers used to call me Muhammad Ali because I got into so many fights with boys in particular. Like, it was just something that, I don't know. And then I gave up that career at the age, I don't know, in junior high school. I actually told this story recently. I don't know what it was, but then, yeah, it was in junior high school. I remember, because, I grew up in Puerto Rico, but in elementary school, it was like the same kids from like 4th, 5th, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. So then 7th grade, it was kids from all over the district. So I didn't really know them. And so I think I was like testing. And then one day, I think I tested this girl a little too much. And I remember, like being in recess and seeing her up in the, like, I don't know, second floor of the thing. And she was like, I was like, oh my God, I gotta go. So I got intimidated and I left. And then I stopped fighting.
Do you think you were mad?
I think I felt like maybe I had something to prove, and I think, I've learned this through therapy. I think I grew up in an environment. It's one of the reasons I actually was sent to Puerto Rico, because my mom was in a relationship in an abusive relationship, and so I saw that, and I think that there was something about me asserting power in my social environments, and I think that's where that came from. But I also think that on another, like, less dramatic level, my mom and my father, who actually ended up meeting much like when I was a teenager, but I always knew he was a martial artist. He's a very well-known martial artist, and my mom was also a martial artist. That's how they met. And so it was in my family, like the idea of the discipline of fighting, not social fighting, but the discipline of like the art of it. And I think, I don't know, maybe there was something in me too that was like, oh, that's my identity as like a warrior. And I remember I still have these pictures of my mom in these like beautiful like kata poses, and yeah. So I think maybe in my mind, when the Karate Kid came out, forget it. I was like, trying to do the whole like thing, not very successful, but yeah.
It's funny because you just, I'm in a skirt, so I will not do the Karate Kid thing with my leg that you just did. But I've actually seen a photograph of you mid-dance where it kind of looks like you're, so it turns out you did wind up doing that.
Yes, I love it. I do think it's like there's a similarity in that art, that martial arts and dance, it's beautiful.
So it's interesting that you say that. When I set out to see you dance, right, and fortunately because of the internet, I could set out to see you dance before I talked with you tonight. The first video that I saw of you dancing was a video from the 90s, and you were dancing with Savion Glover. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk, right, you should see the video. And we will talk more about how you got to know Savion Glover, because he was key to your dance career. But I'm watching you dance with him, and you're matching him. And what I mean by that is that there is a suave swagger to his style. And instead of playing the girl to his style, you are swaggering as hard as he is. I mean, the whole thing is swagger in black, swagger in pink, because you were wearing a pink rose kind of shirt. But you had a swagger to you. And you could not have been dancing that long when you were swaggering next to Savion Glover.
Yeah, well, thank you. I probably when I started dancing with him when I think I was I had been tap dancing for about 2 years.
Okay.
And so
I'm sorry, what?
Yes, I had been tap dancing for about 2 years because I started tap dancing late. I started when I was 19 years old, and fortunately for me, I started tap dancing at a time where there was a resurgence. And so Savion was doing Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk at the Public Theater. And I just remember I was a sophomore in college and going to see that show there. And just being in the seats, like, just as soon as that first number, I'll never forget it, that spotlight comes on, and it's just him in his basketball shorts, and maybe he had like a towel and a hat, or like a little Scully. And he's like, and I was like, I remember looking around like, oh my God, are they listening to this? Like, this is wild. I think it was the first time that I had seen young people of color, like on stage, on a theatrical stage, just sort of being so authentic and also sophisticated, and it was rhythmically intricate. It was just, I thought it was so powerful, and I was a lover of stories and storytelling. I mean, I was an acting major, that's why I was there to begin with. So, but the fact that I saw tap dancing being told in this way, in that particular environment, I was like, oh my God, this is like, I'm gonna do this. This is what I wanna do that, and I wanna do that with him. I wanna do that with people who dance like that, you know. So,
And then you became a lurker.
and then I became, and then I became obsessed. I have a very obsessive personality. And when the show transferred to Broadway, I bought all the $10 student tickets I could possibly get with what, I could afford. Sometimes like they would just let me in. They're like, here she comes again, and I would just sit back there and just watch it. And I was so inspired. I was just so inspired by it, and I just taught myself. I taught myself how to do like those numbers. Anytime they would if they appeared on a talk show, I would record it, and then I would learn that, that dance. And eventually people got to know that I knew the show, and they're like, yo, Ayodele she knows the show. And for me, it was an interesting time because even though I knew I could do it and I wanted to do it so badly, there were no roles for women, no tap dancing roles for women. It was just men. And that was really frustrating. I wasn't discouraged, but it just I saw a wall there. I saw that there was like something that I had to break through. And I think going back to that fighting spirit,
yeah.
I think there was something, and also I'm from the Bronx, so there's that. But that's right. That's right. And so I was like, yeah. I said, I'm like, no, I'm going to make a space for myself. So I would just show up. To the point where I just feel like I couldn't be denied, Yeah.
Okay, so there is... I think you saw the look on my face because there is so much in that phrase. I would just show up. There's so much in that.
Yeah.
Because I would just show up. Most people would not just show up night after night after night in a space that was not for them, in a career that they had been told was not for them. You had been watching women dance backward in heels to try to get the same respect as men since you were a kid, but you just kept showing up.
Yeah, I did. I just, because it wasn't a matter of can I do it? I knew that I could do it, I didn't even consider, I didn't consider that I couldn't do it. And so I literally just showed up. And like, I showed up to like, not only the shows, but like sometimes there'd be the jam sessions with the, and it generally was men because they went forth with a lot more confidence. And a lot of the women that were friends of mine at the time that were studying with me, like just would like not get in the circle, and I'd be like, Like I would just would go in there. All right, my turn. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know. I just kept following that impulse in me to just express. And I do think it goes back to that playground. Now that this is the first time I'm actually like really like feeling the feeling. Like I know I can see the connection, but it was that. No. Like fight or flight. I can do this. But there was a lot of joy. So it was less like I wasn't like even like trying to prove. I just was so happy to be in there in the first place, and I just was following this like energy in me to like just express it,
Do you remember the first combination you taught yourself?
Well, I remember two. The first one is not really a combination. I just because I was obsessed with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. I don't know if I mentioned that already, but I was when I was 17. That was the first time I saw that I recognized tap dancing as tap dancing on a screen, and I was so inspired by them that I would like go rent their movies, and I would go home and I'd like lock myself in the room, and I just would try to like do what they were doing. So it probably sounded like nothing. But in my mind, I'm like, they're moving to the left, I'm going to move to the left, to the right, like the basic stuff. So I do remember those moments. And then I think the second thing that I remember generating, other than improvisation, learning what that was, which was really, which to me is like the foundation of tap dancing. It's a journey. That whole concept of like expressing yourself through the dance and like not taking a class where somebody's saying, here, do this.
Do this move.
Yeah, do this move. It has to come from you. And that's a very scary feeling when you ask somebody like, no, what do you have to say? And you go, and I think, and I remember that, I just remember that journey of like, stomp, step, flap before it became fluid, you know? And as somebody who struggled with language growing up, because I moved to Puerto Rico when I was 9 years old, and I didn't speak Spanish at all. And so I remember that feeling of like having the feelings, but not being able to express myself to my grandparents or to the people in school, you know? And then moving back to New York at 15 and not being able to express myself. And then when I'm asked, okay, now it's your turn, I felt that same thing. What am I gonna say? And then eventually, like, it turns into something, and it turned into something. So I remember that hurdle of expression through my feet. That was just mine.
And you communicate.
Yes.
Do you want to tell me about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and you know, you learn, it's much like language, right? We have these words that are designed to communicate something to whoever's listening, right? And we use them in a very particular order, right? And same thing with tap dancing, like there's steps, like there's a flap, right? And there's a shuffle, right? And there's a step. And then there's a heel, or there's a dig, or there's a toe, right? Or there's a cramp roll, which is like 4 sounds together, right? And so, and then some people know, you know, visually, you know, buffalo, right? Or time step, right? But all of those things are just words. Like, they're just like, they don't really mean anything put together. But like when you have something to say rhythmically, right, then they're there for you. So, and it's an improvisation. It's just whatever comes out at any given day. So like whatever I did just now, it's just whatever the energy was giving me, right? So same thing here. If I want to go. And then you can be here forever, right? The more, right? The more you know, right? And it's just, and the feeling, and it's all different. Thank you. But that's what I mean by like true expression, you know? And that's just like now because I have a lot of energy, so you hit, but you know, the nice thing about it is like some days if you're not feeling so great, or you're just like tired or chill, it can be this. Yeah, I mean, it really just depends on how you feel.
That was smoking. All right, so I want to now, I'm so glad that you took us through that language and the different moods and improvisation in looking at your work, learning about your work to talk to you tonight. I was really struck by this 7 minutes in October of 2016 that seem like to an observer they were a truly breakthrough moment for you. Do you want to describe the 7 minutes that I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure. While I have the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's actually the 7 minutes while I have
7
the
minutes
floor.
while I have the floor. Yeah. Wow. While I Have the Floor was a piece that I wrote and performed initially at New York City Center. It was for a concert that Janine Tesori, one of our great composers who just had an opening on Broadway with Kimberly Akimbo. Congratulations, Janine. Anyway, Janine had invited me to present something in this particular concert. And she knew she's a mentor and friend of ours. She knew about that I was holding something. You know, I think that even with all of the potential and my career of like expression, like I had been holding something back, for like 15, 16 years, where I just felt like I don't know, I didn't know how to give voice or say something, this particular thing. And so she said, will you write something? And so I started to just write about my upbringing, my inspirations, my Ginger Rogers. I spoke about, I wanted to talk about my expression and the way I look at tap dancing through the lens of being a woman, a Black and Puerto Rican woman in particular. And then also, it was at a time where I was also questioning, like, well, what is my legacy? Like, what if I don't speak and share my story? Then am I any different than the Black women tap dancers from the 30s and 50s who I, have been so influential to me, even though I know so very little about them, because nobody thought to document their stories. And so I wanted to just name them because I thought that they mattered. And then also at the time I was thinking, like, is that going to be me? Yeah. So I wrote this thing. And then I was invited to perform it for Hillary Clinton's, it was a fundraiser for her presidential campaign. And it was just like a release for me personally. And I think it was a breakthrough for, I don't know, just my life and my expression.
So to describe for people, I'm going to backtrack. Truth in advertising. Like 15 minutes ago, I was supposed to tell you something, and I got so caught up that I forgot. So let me tell you the thing I was supposed to tell you, audience, 15 minutes ago, which is you can submit questions. You go to sly.do. And it's, as you can see, #Casel, and you can put questions there, and we'll try to get to some of your questions during the evening. That 7 minutes, there's a voiceover, and you're telling that story. You hit many of the themes that you just did in describing it, and you dance. Yeah. You dance over and under and with that storytelling, and it is phenomenal.
Thank you.
It later led to a full one-woman show, your first.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think there's really something interesting. I mean, we are doing Phenomenal Women here. It was a woman who invited you. Savion Glover had already taken you on tour. It wasn't like you hadn't made it into really as big a world as there was. But it took a woman to invite you to show your voice in a different way. Yeah. And then an event for a pioneering woman where you brought that forward and were embraced, and then launched you to become the woman that other women do talk about and will remember.
Wow.
And do you feel like women as well as men have really lifted you up?
Yes. Yes. Wow. Thank you for putting it like that. Absolutely. I'm like, I'm going to cry. Not yet.
Wait.
No, yeah, wait. Oh, I love that. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about my wife, Toria, who for sure uplifts me every day. I think about my colleague. I think I just closed a show on Sunday in New York where I got to dance with Amanda Castro and Naomi Funaki and Dre Torres and Quinn Johnson and those women, and think about how that net is so supportive, Janine is hugely, godly, so influential. My teacher who introduced me to Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, was a woman as well, Mrs. Lara Quente. I do think my mother, I think about my mom. I see my mom's fighting spirit, and I think about how she was always just championing everything that I do, yeah, for sure. And I remember that I just want to just talk about Janine one more time, because I remember that moment when I was doing While I Have the Floor. We were in tech, and they were just setting the lights for my piece. And she also she was the musical director for that particular event. And she was behind me in the piano while they were focusing the lights. And they said, Ayodele, can you come a little further? There was a spotlight. And so as I stepped in, I heard her say, "That's right, go in there where you belong." And I was like, but I remember things, I just remember things like that, and I love it. I love it. Yeah. Think about Lee Silverman. Diane Paulus. I love spaces that are led by women.
So I want to
Yeah.
stay in that vein for a minute. And I'm going to say a series of names to you. You're going to know what they are.
Okay.
But I'm going to say a name, and I'm going to ask the audience to say the name back.
Okay.
All right. Jenny Ligon. Lois Bright. Louise Madison. Cora LaRed. Juanita Pitts. Alice Whitman. So the question from the audience member was, African American women tap dancers were particularly overlooked and have been forgotten. How have you reclaimed their voices? And in that 7 minutes, you say those names because you wanted to reclaim their voices.
Yeah.
Talk about those women.
I'm so happy that to hear the names in this space, because I made a mission, a promise to myself that I would bring them into every space that I occupy.
Yeah.
And so those women were women that I reclaimed, discovered after feeling an absence in this art that had totally consumed me, in the best way, right? And even at my most joyous point, I felt like something was missing. And it was really obvious when audiences would see me dance and be like, well, God, you dance so good. Like, you dance just like the guys. And, like, oh, my God. And I didn't even know women tap danced. And, and I'm like, wait a minute. And so that's what made me, want to find them. And so Jenny Ligon, Lois Bright was the first video clip that I saw. It was Funk University, which was a little workshop that Ted Lewis Levy had been running to prepare young men of color to enter the noise funk Broadway stage. So it wasn't not even for women. But remember I said before, I would show up, I knew where they were rehearsing, and I would just show up, and I would be looking through the blinds, I'm like, let me in. He let me in eventually. And so one of the things that he taught us was history. And so we would watch, during a lunch break, we would watch video clips of Nicholas Brothers and John Bubbles and Bill Robinson. And one day I saw the Miller Brothers and Lois. And I was like, who is that woman who was she was dancing right in between two men, skirt, white shirt, like a blazer, top hat, and she was killing. It was grace, technical, prowess, she was, incredible. But it just said Lois. That's it, Miller Brothers and Lois. And at the time, now there's a bunch of information online, but at the time there was none. And so I remember asking Buster Brown, who was one of our elder masters, who used to run Swing 46 at the time at this club in New York City. And I remember going to Buster afterward and be like, Buster, do you know Lois? Do you know Lois? And he was like, Lois Bright? Yeah. And I'm like, and that was the first time I heard Bright attached to her name. And also I was thinking, why isn't anybody talking about her? If you know her, these names were not coming up. And then, so I made a note of that, Lois Bright. And then I saw this, I was on a cover of the Village Voice, and they had asked me to be on the cover of this thing for TAP. I had no idea what it was. I just, I went to the photo shoot. I was young. I did and I remember being at my mom's house who had a copy, and underneath my foot there it said, "The Hidden History of Black Women in Tap Dance." And I said, oh, wait a minute. Called the Village Voice, got the writer's number. Called the writer. The writer said, Jenny Ligon, who was really prominently featured in the article, she's still alive. You should call her. She would love to hear from you. I was like, what? And so I called Jenny. I don't forget. And her husband picked up the phone. I said, may I speak with Miss Ligon? And she came on. She's like, hello. I said, hi, I am Jenny. This is Ayodele. She don't know me. My name is Ayodele. I'm a tap dancer from New York City. And at the time, I was like, I'm dancing with Savion, I just found out about you. I want to know so much more about you. And it was like this. And she said, oh, my. I thought they'd forgotten me. That was the first thing she said. And I was like, can I come see you? Where are you? Where do you live? And then I flew to, she lived in Canada at the time, but she was going to visit in LA. I went to LA to meet her. And I just remember sitting there in her niece's living room and watching footage of her and Bill Robinson. She was the only Black woman to dance with Bill Robinson other than Shirley Temple. Only, right. And so we watched footage of that. And then from there, I just went in, whoever was around at the time, Marion Coles, who was Honey Coles' wife, I spoke to her, and I was just documenting all these things. Then I found this dissertation by Cheryl Willis, and then this is where I saw, it was like this thick. I ordered it from Temple University, and it came to my house, and I could not believe page upon page upon page, Edwina Saul Evelyn, Jewel Pepper Welch, Alice Whitman, Baby Edwards. Like, it was just all of these Black women that nobody was talking about. And we are in an art form that is obsessed with naming and historical references. And I just thought it was such a crime and a disservice, not only to the art form, but to them, to just omit them, to know that their story was so much more like mine, like that they would like hang around the stage doors, right? And they would just watch, and they learned from men, or they taught them. Like, like Louise Madison, they said that she was so fierce that she could eat Gregory Hines alive, right? Like, and I was like, what? And I was just like, why? And there's no footage of them. And they're these like faded photographs, that maybe like, and it's just, so I don't know. So for me, and I thought about myself and like how I was like, I had danced at the White House, and at that point I danced everywhere. I had toured the world as a 23-year-old, and living, pretty well. And I thought, like, golly, like I felt guilty almost, like I almost felt like, God, this is not right. Like when I would read about the circumstance, first of all, the fact that we didn't know about them, and then to know like what they were up against. Yeah. And I felt like my journey was so much easier. And so what I did was like, I vowed to myself, I said, rather than feel guilt or shame, which is not mine to feel, I wasn't there, I didn't do that. I said, what I can do is I'll bring them into every space that I occupy. So that way, when people see me, they see them, So my success is because of them as well,
At the beginning of that, you mentioned dancing and having people say to you, oh, you're just as good as the guys. And there was a New York Times article where that comes up, right? And they quote, oh, you're just like them, when you were touring with Not Your Ordinary Tappers. Mm-hmm. And when I read that, it got me to thinking about one of your heroes, Ginger Rogers, right? Mm-hmm. And her talking about the fact that the entire time she danced, she was doing everything Fred Astaire did, but backward and in heels. Yeah. And I wondered, oh, you're just like them. Mm-hmm. Was that a compliment because you were, or an underestimation because there was something backward and in heels about what you were doing as a woman in that space? That's a genuine question.
Yeah, like I said, I was obsessed with Ginger, and I watched so many interviews with her, and yeah, one interview, she's like, I take umbrage at the fact that they only attach me to him, because Ginger did 40 films. She won an Academy Award as a dramatic actress for Kitty Foyle in 1940. Like, she was like, she did 10 films with Fred Astaire, right? She did 40 total, and an Academy Award for something else entirely different, and that's all that they would want to talk to her about. And I remember, even as a teenager, thinking like, wow, this woman is really trying to being very clear about reclaiming and like her story and her own journey, not just attached to that of a man, And I think that I don't know, I just remember appreciating that about Ginger herself, and I think that the people who said that to me probably, I think it felt like they thought it was a compliment, I think it felt genuine, and that they thought like, wow, like maybe, and some of this was coming from women. So maybe it's also like not seeing women up there going like, oh, wait a minute, we can exist in these spaces too and be great as well. But that shouldn't be the narrative, right? Like, it's not, I don't know. It doesn't have to be, you can be great just because you're great. It doesn't have to be because you're also like dancing to a guy, next to a guy. Yeah, I don't know.
Let's talk about another guy. So you mentioned Gregory Hines a minute ago.
My hero.
And one of the audience members says, Gregory Hines has said he occasionally borrowed your steps. And I'm assuming that it's like quoting in jazz, that it's actually a compliment, right? What does it mean to you to have Gregory Hines quoting you?
Oh my gosh, I have to say, I miss him every day. I loved Gregory. I love Gregory. And I got to love on him in real life, when he was here. We adored him. Like, he was the best. The fact that as young people we had access to him, that he cared, that he invested. You know, you felt like he was just really like he was watching over us, you know. And this particular, and so whenever he would come to New York, he would call and say, like, you want to go dance at Faisal's? And we would go dance at Faisal's, and which is this like little rickety studio on 47th Street, which doesn't exist anymore. It's like a hotel now. But I just remember, and I hung on his every word. And he had a really big sense, like he had a really like good sense of humor, like, and but I sometimes it went over my head because I took everything he said so seriously. Like, I don't know, there's this like Tap Dance in America clip. I don't know if you ever, it's a documentary that like aired on PBS. And there's a scene where he's dancing with himself. Like, it's like him, like on one side of the screen and the split screen on the other side, he's like, you know. And he was talking to me about this thing in this particular day. He's like, I was like, I love that clip of you when you're like, you know, answering yourself. And he was like, you know, that hurt. And I was like, it did? He was like, yeah, it's a split in half. That hurt. And I was like, wow. Like I really, like it just, you know, because everything he said, I just was like, oh my God, I just love him so much. But no, Gregory was, you know, his birthday is February 14th, and it's not lost on me that it's Valentine's Day because I think he is a reflection of love, and he's a reflection of like mentorship and guidance. I had that particular interview where he said this thing and many others, they gave to me after he passed, and I got to see the full 7-minute interview of him speaking about me that they were asking, and it was really like, how do I say this? It got me through some of the toughest, hardest times in my life for years and years and years and years and years after. Even when I was in my darkest place, when I had so much self-doubt and I didn't think I could do it anymore, or that people wanted to see me do anything relating to tap dancing, I would like play this video and just listen to him, and it would just like lift me back up again.
Why were you in a dark place and didn't think you could do it anymore?
I think, you know, tap dancing, I'm so happy that we're out of this stage, you know, but there was a time when like nobody cared about it. Like, there was a time when nobody cared about it in the 60s and 70s, and that's how we brought back, you know, Jimmy Slide and, you know, Gregory. Gregory was very instrumental in that because he used his celebrity to shine a light on the art form and to bring his teachers, you know, to the light. And so then we had a nice resurgence in the 90s with noise funk, and then in the 2000s, it just kind of like lulled again. And there was no work. There was really no work. And so we would just like, you know, we would teach, you know, and the community, I felt like, it felt like the community that I was in initially, like, was very splintered. And so, you know, I was temping, you know, which was a little depressing. I mean, I was grateful for work, but it just wasn't what my soul wanted to do, you know? And I just felt like, is anybody going to really care again? And like, you know, it was not a great time, you know, it was depressing in those ways too. And also like, am I ever going to be, like, what am I going to do with my life? Am I going to make a mark at all? There's this incredible line. I was in a song. I think it's from Waitress, but I don't know. Something like, it's a line. She says something like, you know, what if this is it? Like, what if this is ever all I'm going to be? You know. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, at 26 to have that thought when your life is really beginning is kind of like, you know, a little depressing. But I just like, I don't know, at a certain point, I literally went back into a basement with a little 4x4 piece of wood and like found my joy again in it, you know, just for myself. Like, I just wanted it for me. I wanted to remind myself what called me to it in the first place. And the minute I did that, and I would just show up for myself this time, and I would just go down there, boom, and just work it out. And it's like I started to like rebuild my, just my joy for it. And then I realized that what I was doing wasn't connected to a job, and it wasn't connected to an opportunity. It wasn't connected to a person. It wasn't connected to, even though all of those things sort of give you the experience, but I realized that it was connected there, and the minute I realized that, I'm like, I am fortified for life with this.
Because it was connected spiritually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Over the last few years, I've started to learn about jazz, a lot more about jazz. Started to love jazz. I have a son who's a jazz musician, and he's really teaching me as we go along. And one of the things that I found myself thinking as I was reading the articles about you, talking about the history of the art form, the loss, the art and the resurgence. These were art forms that in many ways, jazz and tap, were art forms originally birthed by men and women of color, known to be by men of color, and in part ignored because they were by men of color. And then the women of color stood one step further back from there.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is there that relationship between tap and jazz? You've already talked about improvisation like it's jazz.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that in these interviews with these women, they would say like, if there was an act like a husband and wife, and the woman and the wife was like the draw, she would have to like sort of stand back because he was the one that had to get the work. So she like played, I hate to use the word second fiddle, but essentially,
We'll call her second trumpet.
second trumpet, yeah, second, yeah. And so there's that, and then I don't know, yeah. I mean, in short, yes. I also think that there's like I've had to correct sometimes, like with women. Because we can be very nurturing and supportive and, all while also being, the head of things. Like sometimes I think people take that for granted and they just see you as the supporter, the mom kind of thing, and they kind of overlook, I don't know, your other contributions. I've had to like sometimes check some male friends of mine who not for nothing, who I've supported, and just like let them know, like, yes, like, like I'm actually, I support you, and also, this is my gig, or you know what I mean,
Yeah.
or just like
Yeah.
just to remind them, because only because it's dangerous, I think, when you just look at women as just like nurturers and you don't see them for the full powerful people and beings that they are,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we come through COVID. And so much in the arts was under existential threat during COVID, both because we couldn't perform live, people couldn't come live, revenue came, margins were tight for performers and artists beforehand anyway. You actually had a show that was supposed to go live, and then because of Omicron, wound up going virtual first, and then later live. Are we on stable ground again for tap?
Oh.
And if not, I mean, look at this room of people who know the people you're talking about, love the art form. I don't want to use the word market, but there's been a market for it. What else do people who care about art forms like tap, like jazz, need to do now to help those artists thrive again post-COVID?
Yeah. I do think that we're on more stable ground with tap dancing. I do feel like we are, it's very exciting because we've always been here. Like there's never been a lull for us. Like the community has always been thriving. Like there's so many young people now that are just, they're so good. Like,
Name some names.
Oh, golly. Well, I mentioned some already, but like Naomi Funaki and Dario Nadarelli, Andre Imanishi, who's they're 20. There's a Caroline Brody who's like a teenager in North Carolina. There are many, and in Boston has a really thriving tap community too. Just so you know. Oh yeah, come on, tap dancers. Yeah. Golly, there are many. So I think we're on more stable ground, right? And I think that we are finally also like in many places, in film and and in television and on stage and, concert and all this stuff. And I think, I guess one of the, and I also want to say, and we also have a lot to learn. Like, what kind of surface are we dancing on? Like, the even though we're dance, we're also music, so it's an oral art form as well. So like the idea of sound, like what maybe a ballet company requires in an institution is different than what a tap company requires. Like now we have we need a surface and we need we need amplification in a different way. But tap is on Broadway. And Funny Girl,
Because
and
you choreographed.
And so like, and they're really dancing, they're really tap dancing in there.
And that's you. You're the reason. And I am going to pause for a second. Just I want to give credit where it's due. Part of the question that I just asked you came from an audience question.
Okay.
I'm a journalist. We give credit to our sources.
Yes,
So
okay,
part of that question came from the audience. All right.
Okay.
So you got asked to be the tap choreographer for Funny Girl.
Yes, I did. Michael Mayer, who also directed the Hillary fundraiser that I did with While I Have the Floor back in 2016, and he came to see a concert of mine at the Joyce Theater in 2019, I believe, and then he said, "I have an idea. I can't tell you what it is, but I'm gonna call you." And then we had dinner. He was like, "Okay, I have this crazy idea. I'm doing a show, and I'm working with a choreographer, but she doesn't tap dance, but there's a tap in it. Would you do the tap choreography?" I was like, "Absolutely." And I was like, "What is it?" He was like, "I can't tell you." And then finally, he was like, "It's Funny Girl." And I was like, "Oh, what?" And I was so, it meant a lot to me because generally those jobs go to dancers that are not steeped in the tap community, that aren't tap dancers in that way, So the fact that he wanted to have this particular rhythmic voice in this revival, the first one in like 58 years, was like meant a lot to me.
And a lot of the dancers who auditioned couldn't do your moves.
No, but they were like not every. You know what? Some people left, but it was like not hard. It wasn't. I didn't think it was hard, but I just think that like people are not used to like really like being held accountable for the things that are coming out their feet, So they, they were good sports about it, but But we ended up with a lovely cast, and who are holding it down every night, and I love that. But yeah, so to that end, like tap is on a little bit more stable ground, but we have a lot further to go for sure. But it makes me happy because it's I feel like we should be in all spaces that are like not just arts, but like with culture and conversations about social justice and gender and and American history, and we should be in every corner, being represented, and I think that's starting to happen by even virtue of the fact that I'm here. So, yay for that! And how we support it is like exactly what you're doing, right? And then also like spreading the word and like and really to me is like expanding. Being the willingness to like look beyond what you think tap dancing is, because some people, when you say tap, they have very nostalgic feelings of like Fred and Ginger, for example, or their one favorite dancer, tap dancer, and it's just like, but tap is so expansive in its expression, and there's so many incredible artists who are doing really great work that are really representing the fullness of what the art form can do. And so I think having an open mind is fantastic. Is a great way to keep the art form thriving, and then also like. If you go see a show and you love that, like please amplify that. Like the beautiful thing about social media is that you can amplify your message to so many other people, and so you got to use it. Use it for good, and not frustration, because that's what be a keyboard warrior for good, and and love tap and say it.
So I rarely have a question that I want to ask, but there's a voice in my head that goes, "That might be a stupid question." So the voice in my head is, "This might be a stupid question, but I still want to ask it." Is there something out there that you would like to tapify?
Ooh, that I'd like to tapify. Oh, yes. Okay, get ready. It's like we've started to do it in our own little, like, in our human way, like our first number in our Chasing Magic show. But it is, I think, I always say tap dancers are superheroes, So, and by what I mean by that is like, well, first of all, I think the art form is like a genius form, that you have like just like these little two pieces of metal and that you can do so much, like, rhythmically and like just float. But like a lot of these dancers that I mentioned before, like Naomi, and like if you see them walking down the street, like you just would never know that they have this like superpower.
It's the Peter Parker to their.
Yes, yes. And so I feel like I would love to tapify a Marvel Avengers film. Like I don't know, like how is that like a thing? Yeah, I don't know.
All right, let's all put that one out into the universe right now, because
Yeah.
that's something that actually should happen.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think it would be a great idea.
Which superhero would you like to tapify?
Oh,
Do you know?
I don't know. I think I was in the green room today and I was looking at my outfit. I was like, I feel like Black Widow. I feel like so.
There
I don't
you
know.
go.
Yeah, they're all. I love them all. I love the whole Marvel, thing.
So you're not 20 anymore.
No, I am not 20.
But if you could go back now and talk to your 20-year-old self, that young woman who, as I understand it, was 1 year into tapping
Yes.
at that time, what would you tell her now?
I would say just how incredibly wise she was to just listen and obey the thing that was like calling her curiosity. And how it has opened and will, it opened up the whole world, that faith and just but really the following of the curiosity and the following of joy is what like makes life like so exciting and fulfilling, because I feel very fulfilled right now. Even at the top of when the pandemic happened, 2020, like that, and we were all the artists, going back to what you're saying, like what we were doing, I was like, wow, if it ends now, I just like scrolled through my, like the last 24 years of my life. And I'm like, oh, I've done it. Like Gregory Hines, like I've danced with the best. I've danced in the greatest of spaces. I feel like I've contributed to the lives of many people, a lot of young people as well. I've danced for myself. I've danced for the president. I've danced for, I've danced a cappella. I've danced with a symphony. I've danced with the trio. I've danced with one. I feel like I've done it. I feel like I've brought these women with me. I feel like I've amplified their in this energy in this universe, like even more because I've like been relentless about speaking their names. I feel like I feel fulfilled, like I've done good work, And so I was like, if this is it, then I guess I'm going to go garden now and I'm going to love it. And I think that's like, I love that. And so every day for me is possibility and almost like no pressure because I'm not 20 anymore. I feel good. I feel like I want to do new things. I want to do different things. I'm open. And I'm clear about the mission. And for me, the mission is about, what do you do while you have the floor? And how can you make this time now? Because, tomorrow is not promised, right? How do we make the most of our time now? How do we contribute good into, the world sounds very expansive, but how do you do that in your like immediate people? How are you treating your neighbors? How are you treating your friends? Are you connecting with your parents? Or your siblings? Or, are you sharing are you being stingy with what the information you have? Are you making somebody's path a little bit easier? Like to me, all I'm interested now is in sharing and sharing joy and reminding people about like the beauty that's out there. Like on my drive here, I live, from New York, I was looking at the trees. I'm looking at the evergreens that are like showing off. They're like, haha, I'm still green. And I'm looking at the beauty of that. I'm looking at the water. I'm like, oh my God, like life is beautiful, So like, and I want to enjoy every single moment of it, period.
Would you like to take the floor one more time?
Sure, I'll take the floor one more time. And that thing, I'll go over to my mic.
Let's give it up. Let's give it up for Ayodele Casel. Woo! There's no one like her. Tiziana, do you have another question in you, or I was going to invite everyone to go to the lobby? Ayodele, will you mingle a little bit?
Yes,
We've
thank
got
you
some
so much.
students here. We've got some girls who I think want to meet you. There's food and wine, and let's go out and meet this extraordinary woman.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope that